morning, everyone. Welcome to the Symposium on Reproductive Rights. We are here to celebrate the reproductive rights in India, in Indian courts, and also to identify what challenges lie ahead. Uh, we are graced by Honorable Justice Sikri, uh, who's here to deliver the inaugural address. I would like to ask Professor Rajkumar to kindly start this session and introduce to us.
Saturday morning to be able to come for this symposium on reproductive rights in Indian courts. I would like to particularly thank and appreciate the presence of Honorable Mr. Justice Arjan Sikri. As all of us know, the last 5 days of the week would have been extremely busy and hectic, and just when he was hoping to take a break on the Saturday morning, we have brought him here, so I deeply appreciate your presence, sir. At the outset, I would like to really appreciate the contributions of the Center for Health Law, Ethics and Technology, and in particular Professor Deepika Jain for working on this and also many other issues relating to reproductive rights for some time now. And the center has been actively collaborating with many institutions, both within the state of Haryana as well as in India, and also in this case with the Center for Reproductive Rights in New York for working on these issues. I don't know how many of you had the opportunity to see the publication that had come out on this issue, but it's useful to take a sort of an assessment in relation to what the courts have done. They have very rarely we call such work as celebrating progress. The word celebrating in many ways makes an important value judgment as to what has happened, but also it creates opportunities for us to assess in very critical ways some of the challenges in relation to the jurisprudence developed by the courts in this area. I do think that increasingly the social expectations that are being generated in relation to the role of courts in a number of policy-related areas is a question of judgment that the courts have to take. And this is an age-old debate to what extent courts in general and Indian courts in particular can be working in some of the most fundamental public policy areas. We know that public policy is about speaking truth to power, and many a time courts may not be well suited to address these issues. Nevertheless, the Indian courts have always emphasized, particularly the Supreme Court has emphasized, that it's not actually making policy. And so the question that we really need to address is that to what extent law and policy coalesce, and particularly when the courts are interpreting the Constitution, the legislation, and are upholding rights and in many ways contributing to justice. So these issues and many other issues are at stake in today's symposium. And once again, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you. The organizers of this workshop consciously kept it as a small group in terms of the engagement that is going to take place in the course of the day. I hope that many ideas and new possibilities of developing jurisprudence in this area is developed, and it also creates opportunities for discussions within the schools. I recognize the presence of distinguished faculty members from the National Law University in Delhi, and also senior counsels and other lawyers and law students who are participating in today's workshop. So with those few words, I would like to invite Professor Deepika Jain, Associate Professor and Associate Dean of Jindal Global Law School and Executive Director for the Center for Health Law, Ethics and Technology, to give her introductory remarks. Thank you.
Good morning. I'd like to start by thanking Honorable Justice Sikri, Professor Rajkumar, Payal, Colin, and others for their presence and encouragement for this initiative. As you know, Center for Health Law, Ethics and Technology has been working on many issues at the intersection of health, sexuality, and gender. And we've worked on some reports in the past on access to contraception. Recently, we published a very comprehensive case book on abortion laws in India, where we basically focused on all the case law that have been decided in the past 30 years in the Supreme Court, High Court, and some district courts. We surveyed about 6 district courts. So this was a good opportunity for us to collaborate with Payal and CRR New York to engage with and look at some of the promising decisions that have emerged in the courts in the past 10 years and reflect on the challenges that lie ahead. I'd like to now request Payal to also present her introductory remarks.
Thank you. Thank you to the Vice Chancellor for your warm welcome, to Jindal Global Law School and the Center for Health, Law, Ethics, and Technology, especially Deepika and Dupasana, for hosting and collaborating on this symposium. Special thanks as well to Honorable Justice Sikri for your presence today and your work ensuring protection of women's rights in India. And thank you, of course, to Colin Gonsalves and also to Mrinal Satish for the inaugural panel, and Suchitra Dalvi, and all of you here today for making the time to engage in this important discussion on jurisprudence on reproductive rights. I'm the Senior Legal Advisor within the Asia program of the Center for Reproductive Rights, which advocates globally to ensure women's reproductive rights. We envision a world where every woman is free to decide whether and when to have children, where every woman has access to the best reproductive health care available, where every woman can exercise her choices without coercion or discrimination. More simply put, we envision a world where women participate with full dignity and equality as members of society. In India, we have worked with partners for almost 15 years on a wide range of issues, including maternal mortality and morbidity, safe abortion, access to voluntary and safe methods of contraception, and freedom from coercive and unsafe sterilization, and child marriage. As Honorable Justice Sikri actually wrote in a decision just last year, women in this world, and particularly in India, face various kinds of gender disabilities and discriminations. It is notwithstanding the fact that under the Constitution of India, women enjoy a unique status of equality with men. In reality, however, they have a long way to go to achieve this constitutional status. Thanks to the sensitivity of justices such as Justice Sikri, however, progress in upholding women's rights and reproductive rights specifically is happening. Slowly but surely. Recent cases from the Supreme Court and state high courts reflect this, particularly in the context of reproductive rights, which are recognized under human rights law as essential for women's ability to live equally with men and enjoy their rights to life, health, privacy, security, and freedom from cruel and inhumane treatment. Jurisprudence from around India over the last 10 years has recognized women's reproductive rights as part of the inalienable survival rights implicitly protected under the fundamental right to life. In certain groundbreaking judgments, the courts have even for the first time recognized reproductive rights as essential for women's equality and have called for respect for women's rights to autonomy and decision-making concerning pregnancy. In cases spanning maternal health, contraception, abortion, and child marriage, Indian courts have adopted robust definitions of reproductive rights that reflect human rights standards. While court decisions are not uniform, several trailblazing rulings have boldly affirmed women's rights to remedies for violation of reproductive rights, including the first case globally to recognize maternal health as a right, and laid the foundation for Indian courts to continue to play a strong role in preventing and addressing ongoing violations of these rights. Both within India and internationally, these cases mark evolution, from the tendency of lawmakers to uphold stereotypes about women primarily as mothers, and to understand reproductive health as about more than population control, but about human rights. Decisions by Indian courts have been utilized by courts and human rights bodies globally, including most recently in Kenya in a case involving the detention of poor women who had delivered, who then were unable to pay hospital fees. Now, the question before us as lawyers and advocates is how do we build on the momentum of these judicial cases to continue to ensure respect for women's rights and reproductive rights specifically? Women continue to seek justice from the courts for violations of fundamental and human rights arising from gaps, loopholes, and inconsistencies in laws and policies on reproductive rights. New issues continue to emerge on these issues as well. Our task today is to understand the nature of the progress made and identify where we need to engage further with lawyers and with courts and others in the legal profession and outside to continue to build these norms. Today, in the morning, we will have presentations or remarks reflecting on the progress made by Colin Gonsalves, who's a senior advocate who's been litigating many of these cases, by Mrinal Satish, who's done important work on stereotypes in Indian courts regarding women's rights and understanding how those stereotypes also shape the practical realities of women's rights, and then also from Suchitra Dalvi, explaining how these laws and policies affect women on a practical level and affect providers who are trying to provide services and uphold women's rights. So after that, we'll have panel discussions where we get to engage a bit more with the cases. I know not all of us are lawyers, and I think this is a chance as well to understand what has been said by the courts and what it means practically. and then where else we need to go. Someone I was speaking to this week said, you know, sometimes with the law, it feels like it's one step forward, two steps back. And our job here today is to think of how we make it two steps forward, and maybe, let's admit, there are challenges, so maybe there will be one step back, but we want to continue to make that progress slowly and incrementally. So thank you all today for coming, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Payal, for those remarks, and I also appreciate the fact that the Center for Reproductive Rights has been playing a very important role in India and many other countries in advocating these causes. So we appreciate your presence. Now I call upon Honorable Mr. Justice Arjan Sikri, Judge, Supreme Court of India, to deliver his inaugural address. I have to confess that we are ahead of time.
Maybe I consume rest of the time. Thank you very much, and good morning to all of you. As Professor Rajkumar rightly says, on Saturday early morning at 9 o'clock, you people are here. And when we are experiencing in last 1 or 2 days, and particularly I noticed since last evening, second spell of winter again. So the temperature is really dipping. Thanks, Professor Rajkumar, for inviting me and sharing my views on this. And it is always a pleasure in this company where there are stalwarts like Gonzalez, who has been championing the cause, not only human rights in this field, but almost all facets of human rights, and all others who are sitting here. I don't know, from my point of view, my experience is only on this side as a judge when we receive the causes and they come before us, but all of you people are working at the grassroots level, and your experience when you study, yes, in this particular symposium, you are going to study the judgments or reflect on these judgments and how much advancement we have made in these reproductive rights which are to be granted to the women and which are to be realized in real sense. But otherwise, you people know, as I said, the ground reality is much more better, and what is happening at the level of the society in real terms. And when we talk of, if I see the topic and the way I will like to make my introductory remarks on this, of reproductive rights, which of course is a human right, and it is based on human dignity, which is the, my hypothesis on which I will develop. But what I feel is that when we talk of reproductive rights, it is intertwined with the, mixed with the another right of the woman with which we have to start, that is the sexual rights of the women. And much would depend thereon. And let me start with a story. It's a, I'm saying story rather, it's a novel. Most of you must have heard about it, Ek Chadar Main Li Si. There was a movie also made on this. The story of that novel is, although it is on the one particular custom in Punjab, which is based on, we call it Niyoga, custom of Niyoga, is that when in the family, suppose the husband dies and widow is still young, so that custom says that, as per that custom, that widow would be married to the younger brother of the husband or her brother-in-law. Although the story was depicting the evils or good of the system, but it is a real reflection if somebody reads that novel or watches that movie and reflects on that, on the sexuality of women also and their rights. Here the story goes like this. Paro, who is the central character in the movie, her husband is a typical in a Punjab village, that too 50, 60 years ago. He's a person who is a male chauvinist. He's a person who would come home uh, totally drunk. He'll beat his wife. That is treated as if that is his right. And very interestingly, she also gets that beating. And sometimes, because what happens is that there are scenes which are shown there, or the chapters which are there in that novel, they'll show that he is asking her to do a particular thing. It may be work, some household work in the house or something, and she wants to resist. She wants to show, she's getting beating and beating, but would not. So this is sort of a struggle which she thinks that I'll be able to show my dominance because of this reason. But what I'm trying to say is that after that fight, when she's, physically abused, and ultimately, after 1 hour or 2 hours in the night, they are having sex. So she's, succumbing to the pressures or demands, and she thinks that this is her life. This is the way, because I'm not touching upon the women's sexuality and how the women are treated as objects of sexuality in this country, which may not be now the position in urban India, but in most of the rural parts, it still remains the same. What happens is that very interesting. This is the novel. It opens with a scene where this lady is sitting with another friend of hers. So two ladies are watching, and one dog comes. It's a very short scene, and what is told about the, and how the women perceive about the this sexuality of men also, and that is what happens in India. And this bitch, who was very fond of, is lying dead, and he sniffs at the carcass for some time, and then he walks away. And this Rano, not Paro, the name was Rano, who is watching the dog with that women friend, she remarks, the race of men, they are all the same. She's saying a dog, when she sees that how that dog goes away after finding that. And Rano feels the tears smarting in her eyes, but controlling herself, attempts a mild jest. She says, but your dog is not like that. To her husband, your husband behaves little better than how my husband behaves with me. At what happens is, man is murdered, her husband. And therefore, as per the custom, she is married to the younger brother. Now, interesting part of the story is that when she was married, there's a lot of difference of age, and he was a very small boy, and this younger brother to whom she is married now. When she had come to the matrimonial house, he was very, very small, maybe 3 or 4 years old. And when within 1 year of her marriage, she gives birth to her own child, and when she is breastfeeding, many times she will breastfeed that boy also, who now is her husband. So therefore, this this brother-in-law, who is the husband, is not able to accept that, because he had that kind of motherly feeling towards her, and therefore he doesn't accept that marriage. But then she wants that he should behave in the same manner as my husband used to behave. So one day what happens is that this husband now, that brother-in-law, he finds one bottle of liquor which his elder brother had kept in the Almirah, and he had died because, as I told you, he used to drink every day. So because he's a dejected person, and he drinks that liquor, and under the influence of this liquor, there's some scuffle that takes place, because the wife now, Paro, wants to win him over as well. And she thinks that he's my husband now. She doesn't have those kind of feelings that I had brought him like a child. And there this fight takes place, and she is very happy. She thinks that now he is behaving, because here the husband has started beating like her first husband used to, and she is very happy with that. That at least with this, and that in that she is abused physically, and then he realizes this new husband, because he is not the kind of person which his brother was. But then he goes to her, he says sorry and all, and then marriage consummates. Now, how it is described in this, that the psyche of the woman, the Paro, uh, she dimly senses that in the, actually it is, if you, there's a book by Sudhir Kakkar on intimate relationships. And he has, in that book, actually studied the sexuality of, in the Indian psyche of men and women in marriage, in lovers, and even one chapter is on Mahatma Gandhi's with his, but it's a very interesting study, which it may be his doctoral studies of which was written maybe 20, 30 years ago. But and here he describes this and he analyzes this by saying that she dimly senses that in the impending violence, Mangla will beat, Mangla is the name of the new husband, will beat her like a husband, and she will fight back like a wife, finally establishing a conjugal relationship which till now has only existed in the community's will. Afterwards, as she lies in the bed in excruciating pain from drunken blows, a repentant and tearful Mangla, trying to staunch the flow of blood from a wound in her scalp received when he had flung her against a wall, Rano is filled with a deep satisfaction. Now just see, even this physical abuse, she is feeling satisfaction in that. At least what she wants would happen. In the preceding encounter, her body has ceased to be an object of avoidance. It has been manhandled, touched by Mangla as a husband. The marriage is consummated the same night, and the couple begin to live together as husband and wife. What I want to say is that how even there's no sexual freedom as far as wife is concerned. And it's not that even after the marriage takes place between the husband and wife, it is the dominance of the husband when he wants to have sexual relation, when he doesn't want to have. And even if, she is not willing, she has no choice. So that is where, when we come to, and from this, the second aspect in Indian society, when we talk of reproductive rights. So there again, the choice is of the husband in the family, or what the elders say, when there should be a child, whether the child should be male or female. We know about female feticides because of this reason only. And therefore the wife is forced to have a child, and there are many examples and many stories on, many novels which are written on real lifetime experiences when a woman is not able to bear a child or is not able to bear a male child, and she even consents, okay, let the husband remarry and bring another woman so that a male child is begotten in the family. So this is what I'm trying to say is, I start with this, when we talk of reproductive rights in this country, that there is hardly any choice as far as women is concerned. And that is what this novel depicts. And so on this, when we talk of this particular topic today, and I start with this after the story, that when I think about the issues concerning reproductive rights, I can't help but wonder how we as humans have failed humanity. I know the complex ideas we have attached to this issue that the world today has been grappling with. Yet I am perplexed as to how in the 21st century, with all the technological advancements, convergence of laws, frequent guests of the space, creators of human like artificial intelligence still haven't been able to bring our women to enjoy the fruits of humanity. Now that is the harsh reality, and that is why I wanted to start with this novel of Ek Chadar Maili Si. And law in our world can be considered to have triumphant. That yes, We know that much is done in this field, as I'll come to that, particularly reproductive rights by the courts. But then we feel that law has triumphed, or law is victorious in its endeavor to secure justice when uh, the frozen letters of law in the statute, they are given life by application by the courts. That is, in those circumstances where this exclusivity of victory shifts from the rich falling in the laps of the poor, justice is done. And more importantly, when the structures of patriarchy, deep rooted in our world, is left in shambles to then outshine, shown by the edifice of equality, when we feel that these kinds of rights are given, giving women what many may wonder consider as common, in common sense, a right to her own body. So this, when we talk of reproductive rights, I think that is the fundamental which we have to come, and I say common sense, that it is her right to her own body. And this right transcends, it covers both the aspects, right of sexuality and right of this reproduction. And why I call it a common sense, in common sense, because of the inherent nature of this right, which till date the word, whether it is developed nation or a developing nation, despite the plainness, hasn't been able to comprehend. A woman's choice to reproduce, abort, or prevent deals with her body. For it is she who, by virtue of her anatomy, undergoes the process eventually. Whether it is, I mean, from one can understand, because it is her body. Somebody has said, I think Mark Twain or some, no, it's some women activist. She said that if men were to bear the children, there would be only one child per couple. They would not like to undergo this process again. And this is because, but then they would force women to have as many children as they want. So there, one has to realize it is the body of that woman which is involved in reproduction rights. And therefore, it is her right which she has to exercise on that. And here, when it becomes a right of self-determination. Choice has to be hers. Predominant role has to be hers. If at all, when we talk of equality, it can be only that, yes, she, along with her husband or her partner, they can mutually decide. But not that the male partner imposes his decision on the female partner as to what should happen. Because in the entire process of reproduction, it is her body which is used. And she has a right on her own body, as everybody has. That is the fundamental which we have to keep in mind when we talk of reproductive rights. And it is based on what I say, human dignity. This is a facet of human dignity which we have to see, that right of choice, because that is what is based on human dignity. So therefore, as far as reproductive rights are concerned, I remember when here I'm little, when I say right to choice and the body, if you remember this film, I always admire that film which came few months ago, Pink. Now in that movie, if you people have seen that movie, there's a girl who is actually this, it was I think New Year Day or something, New Year Eve, where she had gone with, there was another friend of his, a boyfriend. He was not boyfriend as such in the sense lover, but a friend who was a male friend. And so they went to just to enjoy 2-3 girls, 2-3 boys, and 1 or 2 more boys, they come there and they have drinks, etc. They are celebrating. And then the boy who wanted to, sexually assault her, when she is able to, what she hits him. And it's almost what happens is, in the process, when she hits and runs away from there, that he had almost lost his eye. and gets this bruises around his eye. And he files a false case against her. And she then say, because I'm putting it short, then she files a case of sexual harassment. And that case is now tried in the court of law. And where the attempt on the part of that boy, who is nephew of an MLA, as it happens in such cases, so he is trying to show his power, muscle power also, money power also. And therefore he is bringing witnesses who are trying to tarnish the character of this woman by producing those witnesses that she is a person of loose character and all. But what I'm trying to say is, in this process, Amitabh Bachchan is her lawyer. And in one scene, when he's defending, he asks her, when she is in the witness box, he says that, are you a virgin? And everybody is shocked to see that defense lawyer asking her own client this question. Her father is also sitting in the audience in this courtroom. And he also gets little, embarrassed with this question, and he wants to go out. But she says, look, just everybody can sit, I can answer. And judge also asks if you would like to answer this question in camera, not in the open court. She says, no, I'm not at all bothered about the answer, and I'll answer in the open court, even in front of my father. No, I'm not virgin. I had, my boyfriends, I had sex with them and all that. Now, from this, the other side is really happy because they wanted to show she's a woman of this, she's a girl of this nature. So easily available for sex. So therefore, on that day, she wanted, because their defense was, or the case which they had filed, she wanted and I spurned that. And therefore, she hit me. That was, and the case of 307 was filed by that person against her, and she had filed the case, counter case under 354. But then the best thing was at the end, when the arguments take place. And one word which, when Amitabh Bachchan is asked to open his argument, he says, my argument is one word, that is no. And no is a complete sentence, no means no. What I wanted to show was, you cannot go what kind of person she is, whether in a modern society she is as good as her sexual preferences, etc. But if in particular relationship, if this man wanted and she said no, then he had no right to touch her body. And there the case turns, and this is what we have to understand. There are judgments, we know of this court, Supreme Court, when, if you remember, I have forgotten the name of the case, sexual worker who had filed a case of rape. So almost the same kind of situation. The allegation was, she's a whore, she's a prostitute. How she can file a case of rape? But the issue was of human dignity. Because that particular act, whether she was consensual partner, if she was not, it is rape. You cannot go, what is her life otherwise? That is the message in pink also, in a different sense. So this is the right which we have to recognize as far as women are concerned. And this right is not only of sexuality, this extends to reproductive rights also. And there I say is a right, it is based on what I say is human dignity. And Margaret Sanger has said, no woman can call herself free who does not control her own body. So she is not even, you can't even call her free. That means a bonded person. She is a slave if she has no control over her body. And Hillary Clinton has said once, you cannot have maternal health without reproductive health, and reproductive health includes contraception and family planning and access to legal and safe abortion. So this is in the, when we talk of reproductive rights, what are those rights? They are collectively all those which, economic, political, social, cultural, collectively affect women's health and contribute to understanding of fertility, sexuality, reproductive, procreative, and gender roles. So all are are covered by, I would say, reproductive rights. And here that when I say that it is a case of a person's human dignity, and all the issues have to be dealt with keeping in view this issue of human dignity. And there we can trace this human dignity in Article 21 of the Constitution. And Article 21, because it's right to life, and right to life includes right to life with dignity. It's not mere animal existence which the courts have held. And in this context, right to health is also included as right to life. And right to health includes right to reproductive health as well. And that is what is the message of many judgments which you will discuss in due course of time. I don't want to mention much about this, human dignity aspect, which I can, develop and say in greater detail, but that is not required. What I feel is that when you, as far as the court's judgments are concerned, you will find that they are in this reproductive rights based on this Article 21. A very pertinent issue was raised by Professor Rajkumar on law and policy, and whether, because he has been writing a lot on this subject, and when we talk of over-activism or activist, of the judiciary, and whether we are stepping into the domain of the executive while laying down this law, and are we within our bounds, keeping in view the doctrine of separation of powers. But what I feel is that, and there can't be any dispute, when it comes to human rights, law and policy, policy in economic matters, in commercial matters, in all other things, and what one can understand, there can be a debate. But when it comes to human rights, enforcing of those human rights, I think there, even when the courts have so-called stretched the boundaries, take the case of Vishakha, is a best example which I give. Vishakha was a case, sexual harassment at workplace, we all know. But where the court said that it had legislated, in a sense, that till the time Parliament comes out with this legislation, what we are prescribing here, these guidelines, will be the legislation. Now, it's a clear case of taking away, or rather entering into the domain of the Parliament. This is legislature which is competent to enact the law. But taking the help of Article 21 and CEDAW, etc., those which were to which India is the signatory, and enforcing the human rights of women in this field, when this was the judgment given, nobody has criticized. There may be a criticism when it comes to economic policies, as I say, but when it comes to enforcement of human rights, and here human rights of women, this was a judgment which was, I think, it was applauded all over the world, and even today, and even the legislature or the politicians, when it comes to this judgment, would not say anything. So therefore, law and policy may be that whether the court should interfere in the policy matters or not, may be or may remain, and it will always remain a topic of debate. But when it comes to enforcement of human rights, it should not be, it cannot be. Because ultimately it is the function of the courts to give real meaning to the words which are there in the Constitution or in the statutes. And while doing that, even, yes, it is commonly said that the courts are not here to act as catalysts. But when we have to, what are the expectations of people of this country after all? And when other wings of the state fail on that, Ultimately, it is the judiciary which is the interpreter of these laws, final say in what the law is. And in giving real and fruitful meaning to right to life, and in our context, which includes reproductive rights, if the courts have given the judgments, I think even in this field, rather today also, very I was when I saw this topic, and today also when it was spoken as a judge, I really felt very happy when you say that is something which is to celebrate the judgments which are given by the courts. That normally it is a criticism of the judiciary, that judiciary has not done enough and all that. But here today, one word, that celebration of what the courts have done. Because what ultimately courts have tried to achieve is to give meaningful expression to the rights which are there in law and which are there in the Constitution. And if you see, as far as these reproductive rights are concerned, and the judgments of the court, they are, broadly, because we will be discussing all this judgment, I have those judgment, I don't want to speak much on that, and to this audience particularly, but I feel that these are mainly in three categories. That access to medical facilities for pregnant women. There's a judgment of Delhi High Court of Justice Muralidhar on that, where she was not given, she was carrying a dead fetus in her body, and for 5 days she had to run from one place to other, and the hospital did not provide the adequate medical facility. It is Lakshmi Mandal versus Deen Dayal Harinagar Hospital of Delhi High Court, as I said, Justice Muralidhar's judgment. And where this, of course, in reproductive rights context only, so they said access to medical facility for pregnant women is her fundamental right, and if the hospital had not given it, it failed in discharging their duties, and the compensation was given. Second types of cases are precautions while doing this sterilization procedure in in the camps, etc. There is one judgment. If you see, this is Devika Biswas versus Union of India. It is of 2016 only, 10 SCC 726, when this sterilization procedure in a camp in highly unsanitary conditions in Bihar, which had taken place, and the court came heavily against that. And third is, which we keep discussing, and which has become the central point nowadays, that right to get unwanted pregnancy terminated. And it may be a case where the one case where a woman prisoner became pregnant, maybe physically abused, sexually abused in the while in prison, and she wanted pregnancy to be terminated, that unwanted child. Yes, it was done by the court, and we have come across many cases where a girl or woman subjected to rape, and she becomes pregnant and she doesn't want. These cases have come up. One judgment given few days ago only, and one case where even a mentally retarded woman became pregnant because of rape committed on her. And courts have, in all such cases, they have ensured that the right is given. But a very interesting issue, which I would say at the end, and you will be discussing about all this, and two aspects which, apart from the judgments which are highlighted in panel 2 and panel 3, which are, I think, the core issues, is recognition of reproductive rights as essential for women's autonomy and substantive equality, which I'm trying to say, and the another one is forced pregnancy as mental and physical trauma, which I have highlighted by saying societal norms, etc. But here the issue comes, what's the way forward, what we can do? And I think issues of law and society, the interconnection between law and society is to be reflected at this stage. Actually, if you see, when we talk of the connection between law and society, we have found that there may be three aspects of it. We have found in many cases where law has become catalyst for change in the society. Take the example of sati. when the law was passed banning that sati pratha. And over a period of time, it happened. Take the example of women, in Muslim women, their right of maintenance. It is the law, maybe it started with the judgment of this case, in Shah Banu's case, but thereafter the parliament had to legislate. So that is one aspect where the law becomes catalyst. Many times it is the social change or which is taking place which forces the legislature to pass the law on that. Take the example of Nirbhaya case. So Nirbhaya case, and which the agitation which started after the rape and murder of Nirbhaya, which led the forced the government to constitute Justice Verma's committee, and on that report which was given, so many amendments were carried out in criminal law to give more protection to the women. So the law has changed because of the societal pressures. But the third aspect which we are concerned here is, and which is more important, is that many times, whether it is where the law wants and law steps in to change the ills in the society, but has not been able to achieve it because of societal norms which still remain, and the mindset of the people which doesn't accept. And the best example is dowry, anti-dowry law. Although this was enacted, but we know even today it is rampant because the society is not accepting. Everybody, whether he is educated, whether he is uneducated, whether he is rich, whether he is poor, we still believe that dowry is to be given or taken. So in spite of this law in place, it has not happened. And when we talk of reproductive rights here, and as I said, that unless that is why I started with this Ek Chadar Malisi and the psyche in the Indian society, and particularly in rural India. So unless that is changed, unless this societal norms change, unless there is a change in the mindset, unless people feel and they give equal right to women at ground level there, yes, law would be there when sporadic cases come before the court. But how many times these cases, maybe 1 or 2 out of 100, such cases come. Other cases, we know of domestic violence. It may take place day in and day out. And the issue is now about, we have been discussing when we talk of sexuality about matrimonial rapes. But how many women come out because of the social conditions in which they are? It may be poverty, it may be illiteracy, it may be the many such factors that they are forced by their domestic factors. She doesn't want any cleavage in the family. She has children. Even if when she is subjected to domestic violence, she is living in the same house. She knows that if I go to court and file a case against my in-laws or my husband, I won't be able to live here. So all those things, unless the woman is empowered economically as well, and she becomes free. So these are the challenges when we talk of this meaningful rights which are given to the women. And let me at the end say about it in my conclusion that in 4 lines that it is about women. She comes in this world with her body and leaves with her body. It's she alone and no one else, for that's the way it is to be. Who are we to deny her desire to be free? How can we refuse to give her that which is hers only? These are the 4 lines in a poetry penned by my law clerk, Ishmit, and she gave it to me. So a very fine poetry, and the right which is given to her. And what is the role and how it has to be perceived by the other half, that is the men. We call it that women are normally we treated, and the phrase which is used is the better half. But don't even give the tag of better half, at least equal half. And I tell you, sometimes some advertisements which gives such a fine message. Today in the morning, if you see Delhi Time, and there's an advertisement given by United Colors of Benetton, UCB, and of course it is because Valentine Day is coming, it's on 14th, and it says United by Half. It's an advertisement, and what is the message which is given? From the side of women or the girl side, it is said, we are not better halves or worse, and we are definitely not the weaker halves. We won't settle for less, and we want all we want is our half of the space, our half of the take, our half of the give, our half of the strength, our half of the food on the table, our half of the opportunity for education, our half of the decision in the decision making. This becomes important in reproductive rights. Women have been denied their half for far too long. This Valentine's Day, let's unite for equal half. This is what it says. And there's a message for men also there. As men, we were told we are the stronger ones, but the strength of will has no gender. We were told we should lead, but vision doesn't come in his or hers. No longer will the decisions that affect us both be made by just one, because the decision of reproductive rights, whether we should have child or not, and at what time and how we should space the children, it affects both the partners. So no longer will the decisions that affect us be made by just one. It's time we claim our halves too. Now the men are claiming our halves, and what in what manner? Beautifully it is stated, our half of the responsibility as a son, our half of the sacrifice as a partner, our half of sleepless nights as a father, our half of the commitment as a friend, our half of a compromise as a colleague. It's not about treating women better, it's about treating them as equals. This Valentine's Day, let's unite for their equal half. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Justice Sikri, for that really comprehensive tour de force on starting from the movie and the novel and, of course, the complex issues of the jurisprudence developed, and indeed ending with Benetton. I was just thinking that the whole thing has been recorded, and I can't imagine that Benetton could have got a greater ambassador, or for that matter, Valentine's Day could have got a greater supporter in what you so beautifully articulated. On a more serious note, I want to just also flag the point which he mentioned, that how sometimes popular media, even films, can profoundly influence thinking. I remember after watching Pink, many judges I had spoken to, and I had suggested, and I'll make a request, that that movie should be probably be made a compulsory viewing for every judge in the country. The judicial academies should make it as a part of its course, because we've had many movies reflecting the courtroom drama when it comes to gender issues, but very rarely a movie could capture the nuances of the dynamics of gender narratives as effectively and as poignantly as it did. So I think it's something worth doing it. And lastly, I will just mention that in the question of, I entirely agree with Honorable Justice Sikri about the fact that when it comes to issues relating to human rights, courts have inevitably played a very stronger role, and at times governments and legislatures have been weaker. My own concern, and as law students, we've all been appreciating and celebrating the role of courts and the jurisprudence developed, but I also see a major fault line, at least in our country, that when our jurisprudence, particularly the courts, have been progressive and have been delivering far-reaching judgments, to what extent the society and the institutional context in which we are functioning is able to contribute to that change, and how do we build a legal culture that promotes the respect for the rule of law. In some ways, we also need to, and that's not necessarily the role of courts, but something which is outside the courts, which is civil society, academic institutions, lawyers, communities, and many others have a very big role to develop a culture that will in many ways challenge stereotypical perspectives. And that's something which, in fact, NDTV is now doing something called, I think, say no to fairness creams, or something as basic as that, how different forms of stereotypical engagements have happened. And once we deal with it, we'll be in a better position to address this. And I will echo Justice Sikri's point that we need to celebrate the role of the courts, particularly, and so that gives sort of not only an endorsement, in many ways provides legitimacy to the functioning of our institutions, and also provides opportunities for those judges, people like Justice Sikri, who are at the vanguard of legal and judicial reforms at many levels. I will also, I know he can't say that, but I would like to say that at some point of time, we would like to see the Supreme Court of India correcting the mistake that it did in the NAS Foundation judgment. And ultimately, I hope to see a day when the Supreme Court of India will correct its mistake in relation to that judgment. So with that, I would like to thank Honorable Mr. Justice Arjan Sikri for his presence. I think he has really charged up all of us in relation to what he has spoken, and set the tone for the rest of the day's symposium. And I'm very happy that we have recorded this, because I would like to have our students, a successive generation of students, actually to hear his reflections today, because as I said, very rarely a judge of the Supreme Court, a sitting judge, could speak and did speak so candidly, so reflectively, so rigorously, so engagingly, with so much of informed understanding and analysis of an extremely complex issue, even which academics and lawyers, not just in India but around the world, at times frown to do it. So I'm really grateful to Justice Sikri for his leadership, his thought leadership, and his deeply engaged contribution towards jurisprudence. So with that, we begin, I suppose, the next panel. Do people have a cup of coffee or something?
Yeah, we could.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Payal, you had something to say? Or?
We can start the next.
Yeah, we can
Okay,
start the
all right.
next.
Thank you to all of you. I would like to present a small memento in appreciation of Justice Sikri's presence.